Victoria, the New York Times says, quote, taken together, her plan represents more of a reboot of President Biden's economic policy than a radically fresh start, a new sales pitch focused on its most popular aspects, not a new vision. Many of the policies reiterate or build on proposals in Mr. Biden's most recent presidential budget. What are, Victoria, the challenges for the vice president here?
Well, first of all, here we see her going deeper, right? So we're not seeing a radical shift away from what Biden has done, but stepping back, you do see a shift from what the Democratic center was during the Clinton administration, for example, or the Obama administration. So I think you see that progressive move toward progressive policy. So I think that's really important to see that new shift within the Democratic Party. And what this means on the ground is a lot more tangibility. In what we're going to be seeing rolled out here, we're talking about eggs, butter, bread. We're talking about the insulin that people need to take on a daily basis. And then also thinking about our children, our homes, things that are those kitchen table issues. And I think at the end of the day, it really is about the economy. It is about figuring out what your stability is. So I think in going here, she wants to reach that disaffected group of, say, independents and Democrats who have shifted toward the Republican Party in making the tangibles front and center.
You know, Tim, the Washington Post described this as an aggressively populist economic agenda. So there's different sides depending on where you're standing. What do you think here Republicans are going to pick apart in their criticism of the vice president's policy?
Yeah, for sure. Look, some of this stuff, Jose, is good politics and not that great economics. And so I think that it's good for her, right, to be forward-looking rather than defensive of the Biden agenda. All the things that Yamiche listed poll very well, all are very popular. I think if you're on the Republican side, you're going to look at this and try to turn the price gouging, her efforts to stop price gouging at grocery stores, and say, well, that's price controls. That's what you see in socialist countries. That's backfired. It hasn't worked. Donald Trump tried to deliver that message yesterday at Bedminster. He had one or two sentences about it, but then it was so rambling and he got distracted and started talking about so many other things and issuing personal attacks. So I think it really overshadowed the substance of the economic attack. But I think that is where they will try to focus, that some of this is big government gone awry, that it's not actually, that it might actually exacerbate inflation more than do anything to combat it.
Yeah, I mean, Victoria, President Obama's top economist is apparently not a fan of this plan to go after price gouging. He told the Washington Post, quote, the good case scenario is price gouging is a message, not a reality. Bad case scenario is that this is a real proposal. You'll end up with bigger shortages, less supply, and ultimately risk higher prices and worse outcomes for consumers if you try to enforce this in a real way, which I don't know if they would or would not do. How should the American people know what are realistic proposals and what is just messaging?
So we're in the thick of campaign season, so we are going to see a lot of these bold messages come out. And to Tim's point, these issues poll extremely well. The other thing we all have to keep in mind is that the president by herself or himself cannot do it all. There's going to have to be a lot of help from Congress. So it also is going to depend on what the public decides and who they send to Washington. So these proposals, their ability to actually take effect are going to depend on that. So I think that this is the place, and maybe the American public will balance this message out with a Republican Congress, and hence trying to check and balance those potential off effects from a price control or price gouging, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, Ted, the vice president will have to kind of thread the needle of, and we just, started talking about this, kind of embracing the president's economic policies that have been very successful and that are popular, but also distancing herself from the more unpopular aspects of his administration. How is she to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, I think probably by not worrying about defending the president's record that much. That's what I would recommend that she do at least. One of the core messages here that she's offered is that we're not going back. We're focused on the future. We're focused on how to change things to make things better for Americans. I think people are very tired of the Trump years, even though Biden was the president. He was president during this kind of era where Donald Trump has overshadowed a lot of our politics. People are sick of it. They're sick of him. And I think the more she can talk about her policy proposals going forward and not get bogged down in being defensive of, the Biden-Harris agenda on economics, which has been pretty good, frankly, but it's just not worth arguing at the details. Like, the best thing to do for the campaign is to talk about what she's going to do going forward, and I think that's what she's focused on.
Yeah, I mean, Victoria, to that point, Peggy Noonan writes about Vice President Harris's acceptance speech at next week's DNC as the biggest speech of her life. And she writes something, just want your thoughts on this. She writes, quote, "Here is her big opportunity. Nobody knows how she thinks. We don't really know what she thinks either, but how she thinks is more interesting and important. So far, her story is her persona, child of immigrants, mixed race, a woman who's risen high. What else is in there? What does she see when she thinks of the word America? What is its story, and does she understand it? How will she add to it?" It's a really interesting concept. What do you think, Victoria, her speech needs to be about?
So, first of all, it's an introduction, Jose. Folks know she is the vice president, but they really don't know Kamala Harris for the most part. This is such an important part just in terms of connecting with the broader American public. And aside from that, I think picking up on themes she's already been establishing. Number one of optimism and forward thinking. We're not going back. And not only are we going forward, but I feel really good about where we're going forward. And on the immigrant piece, and we've been seeing bits and pieces of this. So she is that American dream story. And further, this is about not just surviving in this country, but about thriving. And I think that if she can capture that energy and coupling it with that forward vision, I think that can be extremely powerful.